Hello everyone, welcome to our video. I'm Ashley and I'm here with Emily and Courtney, and today we're going to be talking about our ethics project. So just an overview of our problem. We're going to be using a neural network to decipher whether an answer to an ethical question is go or no-go. We're going to provide crucial questions in order to get to the bottom of the situation before rendering judgment. And our question here is it ever justified to kill a person? So for our approach, we put ourselves in the place of a jury trying to decide if someone should be convicted of murder or not. So the purpose of this network is not to decide what kind of sentence a person should receive, but should they receive a sentence at all. So to train the network, we came up with different scenarios or court cases and answered a series of questions about that case. So for example, one scenario we used was an armed burglar breaks into a house when the homeowner is home, and then the homeowner shoots the burglar. So we asked the questions such as, was the shooter in immediate harm's way? Was killing necessary to preserve the shooter's life? Was the victim or the burglar able to defend themselves? So when we were answering the questions that we came up with, we generally agreed that in almost all self-defense cases, the killing was justified as long as the shooter's life or someone else's life was in serious danger or the victim was threatening and armed. However, if the killing was not necessary to preserve a life, it was never justified. So there's a difference between someone who senselessly murdered and someone who got carried away and took self-defense too far. So in court, the sentences would be different, but in both cases, the killing was unjustified. So our neural network simply aids in deciding whether or not a kill was justified and doesn't speak to the extent that a person should be punished.
Okay, so here's our pool of 19 questions that we used to train our system. They are, was a killer in a war? Was the killer in imminent harm's way? Was the killer defending their life? Was the killer defending a family member who was in imminent danger? Was the killer defending someone else who was in imminent danger? Was the killer committing a criminal act? Was the victim an innocent minor? Was the victim able to defend themselves? Was the killer vengefully angry? Was the kill premeditated? And continuing, was the killer defending someone else? Was the killer defending a family member? Was the killer in a just war? Was killing the person necessary to preserve the killer's life? Was killing the person necessary to preserve someone else's life? Was the killer defending their beliefs, such as religion or cultural beliefs? Was the killer defending their or someone else's property? Was the killing an accident? And finally, was the victim using a weapon to threaten the killer? So some of the questions might seem a little redundant, but as we were going through putting together our scenarios, we kept coming up with more questions to really clarify the whole scenario and what was going on between the killer and the victim. So here are some of our example scenarios that we put together. One chunk of them was variations of burglary, because just because someone's breaking into your house trying to rob you doesn't necessarily mean that they deserve to be killed. So, we have a non-threatening armed burglar who maybe didn't realize the house was even being, there were people in the house and would have left, but the homeowner was just so angry that they shot them. We also have variations of a police officer killing. Some of them aren't justified, some of them are. We have variations of where people are in a fight. Again, some of them are justified, some of them aren't. There's one where it was just a freak accident where they weren't even trying to kill the person. We have variations of a war where they killed a POW, for instance, and one where it was intentional, another one where it was accidental. I believe both of them were not justified, but again, that would just kind of play a role in the jury's verdict. And finally, a drug dealer defending his life from a client.
Before we go into MATLAB and really show you our neural network function, we just wanted to take you into our Excel document that we used for kind of thinking out the different scenarios for our neural network that we're going to train it with. And as you can see, we have all of our questions right here, and then we have a little synopsis of the scenario that we based each of these on, going throughout the Excel document. And then just easily enough, we could just copy and paste from Excel into MATLAB and use the matrix and utilize Excel and MATLAB in that way. So here we go in MATLAB. We'll just kind of walk you through the process of developing our function. And in that, we use the neural pattern recognition app. And so I'll just kind of click through this, and we've already created our function, but we just wanted to walk you through it. So we've put our inputs that I just talked about from Excel, we copy and paste those into a matrix, and it came through as a 19 by 29 matrix, which, as you can see, represents 29 samples of 19 elements, the 19 elements being our questions. And then we have the targets, which is basically the answers, whether it's justified or not for each scenario. And so we have a 2 by 29 matrix representing 29 samples of 2 elements. So either a 1 for yes, it is justified, or a 0 for no, it's not. So moving on, we kept the MATLAB defaults for the training and validation and testing portion of the creating the function. And as you can see, those are listed right here. And then we'll continue. So we also use the default for the 10 the hidden number of hidden neurons being 10. And then we trained, as you can see, we've already trained it, so it just says retrain here. And from this, we were able to get a pretty good percent error. As you can see, we have 0. So it proved to be, even though we didn't have that many scenarios, we were able to capture the essence of our neural network answering the question, is the killing justified or not, through the scenarios that we came up with and through the multiple questions. We had 19, which is a little more than we had anticipated in the beginning, but it all worked out, as you can see, through the percent error that we had. And then, of course, here we just created the MATLAB function, but we've already done that, so I'll just exit out of this portion now and take you into like the actual code that was generated from using that app. And as you can see, we've been kind of playing with it a little bit, but I'll take you through a couple of the situations. The first one I'll do, let me tab this out. The first one we'll do is just testing it against one of the scenarios that we kind of used when originally came up with the function. So this is a car rampage. It's going to be an intentional killing. The killer stole the car and just drove through a crowd, killing dozens of innocent people. And we'll go ahead and run that and see what the result is. So here, the first number represents the percentage of the scenario being justified, and the second is that it's unjustified. So we agreed that this would be an unjustified killing, and as you can see, the MATLAB neural network gives us the same answer. One that's a little bit more interesting is this last situation that we ran through our neural network function, which is a civilian just going about their normal day. They look over and see an innocent girl being hurt in an alleyway, and the civilian tries to get the person to stop hurting the girl, but they can't. They're relentless, and so the person is starting to really hurt and get to the point where they're going to kill the girl if the civilian doesn't do something about it. So this civilian decides to take matters into his own hands and shoot the person who's harming this innocent girl. And so when we run this one, it gives us a little bit not as a clear reading as our previous one. Even though it's 97% is a justified killing, there's still a 2% chance that it's not. But as far as we're concerned, this was a justified killing for us, so the neural network does still agree with us. And then just to show you that the neural network works in giving a situation that we trained it with, just for like functionality of it, we'll go ahead and test this one. So we'll just copy and paste from the column. We'll say equals that. Let me comment this one. So just to prove that the neural network does indeed work with the given situations it was trained with. So as you can see, this results in the killing being 100% justified, and if we go into the targets, that's exactly what we trained it with. So just testing the functionality of it. And then we showed you kind of the new examples that we worked with it. And we found that throughout working through some new scenarios that the neural network that we created does indeed agree with our ethical viewpoints. So proving that we were able to kind of take a question being, is this killing justified or unjustified, and kind of put a really good moral autonomy to it to use in court cases. So, and then just kind of coming back to the PowerPoint, we took out some highlights from MATLAB. I already pointed this out. This is our training, validation, testing, and this just shows that our percent error was 0, which proves that the scenarios that we used to train the neural network were a good pool of scenarios, resulting in a really good validation and testing period, resulting in our neural network being very accurate. And this is also portrayed in this the Confucian matrix table over here, as you can see in the training, the validation, the test, and overall it's a 100% functionality. So that's good. And then coming over here, we just kind of snippeted out our function. You can see that right here. This is an example input, and then this is an example output, and that's the one that I went through.
All right, so in conclusion, as we mentioned, our network was trained with 19 questions and roughly 30 scenarios, and it's running a neural network to see if a kill was justified or not, and we were trying to see if we could accurately do that. We feel that our set of questions accurately analyzes most situations, but obviously more training data would make it even stronger. The neural network allows jurors to be morally autonomous and not allow bias to get in the way of decisions, which we think is important. But again, this would just be a tool to assist them, because we don't think that it should be a final say, because there is definitely some human emotion that gets involved, but this would be a good starting basis for them when they're coming to their conclusions on a case or not. And that is all we have for you. Thank you guys for watching.